As Bastian and I pulled into the parking lot of the Marshall Foundation Research Library, we were sure we were being watched. The mysterious women from the New York Public Library had been tailing us the entire drive, and now they sat in their car a few spots away, their eyes fixed on the entrance. We approached the librarian at the front desk, who greeted us with a polite but firm smile.
I'm sorry, but as I mentioned on the phone, your request to access the Friedman archives has been denied by the FBI. However, most of the information has been digitized and is available online.
My heart sank at the news, but before I could respond, Regina appeared at my side.
Amalia Rose and Bastian Ham?
Who the hell are you?
Regina Anderson III, granddaughter of the greatest librarian in history. We need to talk.
Bastian and I exchanged a glance, but followed Regina outside, where she led us to a secluded bench near the library's entrance.
I trust your trip to Italy was productive,
she said, her eyes darting around as if checking for eavesdroppers.
I have reason to believe that there's unreleased information in the Friedman room inside the vault. Information that the FBI doesn't want journalists like you to access.
I felt a surge of excitement at her words, but also a flicker of suspicion. And why should we trust you? I asked, my eyes narrowing. Regina took a deep breath as if steeling herself for what she was about to say.
Because I'm part of an ancient secret society of librarians and friends tasked with protecting the information contained in the Voynich Manuscript. Texts we can no longer decipher. We call ourselves the Order of the Nine Realms. Ethel Voynich, Elizebeth Friedman, and Dr. Emily Hathaway were all sisters, working to uncover the manuscript's secrets.
I could hardly believe what I was hearing. A secret society of librarians, dedicated to preserving and uncovering the truth about the Voynich Manuscript? It sounded like something out of a Dan Brown novel. But as I listened to Regina's story, the pieces began to fall into place.
Why is the FBI blocking us?
It all goes back to J. Edgar Hoover. When he was a young man, he worked as a clerk at the Library of Congress. He fell in love with a woman who was part of our order and a prominent figure in the women's suffrage movement. But Hoover was vehemently against women's rights, and their relationship ended badly. He became obsessed with her, following her everywhere. That's how he discovered some of our society's secrets.
Wasn't he the dude who took credit for Elizebeth Friedman's code-breaking work against the Nazis in World War II? Regina nodded, her eyes distant as if lost in thought.
Ever since then, a shadowy branch of the FBI created by Hoover has been trying to contain any information related to the manuscript, suppressing the truth about the lost matriarchal civilization it describes. But we've been fighting back, working in secret to decipher the manuscript's mysteries and share them with the world. Hoover is not the first man in history who has tried to suppress and even destroy our legacy. There have been many, for centuries, too many sisters silenced, tortured, burned.
I felt a chill run down my spine at the thought of a centuries-old war being waged in the shadows, with the Voynich manuscript at its center. But I still had so many questions. If what you're saying is true, I asked, why come to us? Why reveal yourself now? Regina fixed me with a piercing gaze.
Because, like Dr. Hathaway, I believe you have the skills and the determination to help us unlock the manuscript's secrets. And because I think you deserve to know the truth about what you're up against.
She glanced at her watch, then stood abruptly.
Meet me back here after closing time tonight. I'll get you inside the vault, but come alone and tell no one what I've told you.
And with that, she turned and ran toward her car. Bastian and I sat in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process everything we had just heard. I don't know if we can trust her, I said at last, my voice shaky. But if there's even a chance that she's telling the truth... Bastian nodded, a grin spreading across his face.
Then we've got to check it out. I mean, secret societies, hidden knowledge. This is the stuff of legends, Rosie.
I sighed. All right, Ham, let's do this. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, Bastian and I rendezvoused with Regina at the library's back entrance. Bastian had insisted on bringing his video equipment, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes as he adjusted the camera on his shoulder, Scully perched precariously on top of the lens. "Ham, is that really necessary?" I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one had spotted us. "We're trying to be stealthy here, not film a documentary." Bastian grinned, his teeth flashing white in the moonlight.
Come on, Rosie, this is the scoop of a lifetime. We've got to document every moment for posterity. And think of the views we'll get on YouTube.
I groaned, but before I could argue further, Regina appeared at the door, her keycard in hand. She swiped it through the lock and the door clicked open with a soft beep. She scowled at Bastian.
"Don't you dare film me."
As we slipped inside, I felt a twinge of annoyance as Bastian paused to take a photo of the darkened hallway, the flash illuminating the space like a lightning bolt. "Bastian," I said, grabbing his arm and dragging him forward, "we don't have time for this." But Bastian just shrugged, his grin widening.
Relax, Rosie. With my keen eye for detail and your investigative skills, we'll crack this case wide open. And we'll look damn good doing it too. Say cheese.
I flashed a forced smile. Bastian's enthusiasm was infectious, even if it was sometimes misplaced. Inside, the library was a different world. The musty smell of old books filled the air, and the dim emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the stacks, the tall, imposing shelves that seemed to stretch on forever. Regina led us through a maze of bookcases, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness.
The Friedmans first encountered extracts of a transcription of the Voynich Manuscript in the early 1920s through Professor John C. Manley. Elizabeth and her husband William were working at Riverbank Laboratories under the eccentric tycoon George Fabian.
But they failed to decode it, right?
Bastian asked, tripping over a stack of books left on the floor.
Decades later, Elizabeth actually decoded a small part of the Voynich Manuscript.
Regina explained as we walked.
One of the methods she used was based on the illustrations.
My eyes widened as I remembered the photograph of the Friedmans and their World War I code-breaking team. "Wait," I said, stopping in my tracks. "Are you talking about the knowledge is power Baconian cipher?" Regina turned to me, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth.
Close. Emily Hathaway told me Elizabeth applied the same principle to the Voynich Manuscript, using the women's positions to unlock a hidden message.
I felt a rush of pride at having made the connection, and Bastian shot me an impressed grin.
Look at you, Rosie, cracking codes like a pro.
Regina smiled.
Elizabeth was hyped about what she found. You know, she wanted to share it with her crew, this group that William Friedman put together to study the manuscript. But as soon as they got to work, she started getting these shady letters, telling her to keep her feminine fantasies to herself, or her man would pay the price. Can you believe that? So Elizabeth had to put out these fake stories saying the manuscript was impossible to decipher. The decipherer is doomed to utter frustration. That's the quote everyone remembers, but it's a damn shame.
At last, we reached the vault. Regina typed in a code, and the heavy door swung open with a groan. Inside, the air was cool and dry, and the shelves were lined with boxes and books. We began searching through the materials, carefully examining each document and photograph for any mention of the Voynich manuscript. Time seemed to crawl by as we pored over the archives, the only sound the rustling of papers and the occasional meow from Scully. But just as I was starting to lose hope, Bastian let out a triumphant shout.
I found something,
He called out, holding up a sheaf of papers.
An encrypted letter addressed to Elizabeth from someone named Arthur Burton.
I felt a jolt of recognition at the name. Arthur Burton? That's the protagonist of Ethel Voynich's novel. The Gadfly was published in 1897 and became a bestseller in the Soviet Union. It was a hugely progressive book for its time, advocating for an end to oppression. Regina peered over Bastian's shoulder, her eyes glued to the letter.
Okay, so check this out. Ethel, she was George Boole's daughter. You know, the guy who basically invented computer science and Boolean algebra? Yeah, that Boole. So, you know Ethel was no slouch when it came to ciphers.
She paused, wheels turning in her head as she studied the letters.
I'm betting they used a book cipher. It was the go-to move back in the day. You take a specific book, right? And each set of numbers in the message points to a word or phrase in that book. Ain't no cracking that code unless you got the right edition.
I looked around at the hundreds of books lining the shelves, feeling a sense of despair wash over me. But which book did they use? Suddenly, Scully leaped down from Bastian's shoulder and darted over to a dusty corner of the vault. She pawed at a stack of books until one tumbled to the floor, its pages splayed open. I picked it up, my heart racing as I read the title. "The Gadfly First Edition," I breathed. "Scully, you brilliant little furball." Bastian scooped up Scully and kissed her.
And that's why this hamster loves cats.
But before we could celebrate our discovery, an alarm pierced the air, and the vault was flooded with flashing red light.
We've been compromised. Take the letter and the book. We need to go, now.
We raced through the library, the sound of sirens growing louder with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest as we burst through the back door and into the night. But as we reached the parking lot, I realized Scully was missing. Bastian turned to me, his eyes wide with panic.
Scully must have run back inside the vault. I have to go back for her.
Before I could stop him, Bastian sprinted back towards the library, disappearing into the shadows. I hesitated for a moment, torn between the need to help my friend and the fear of being captured myself. But Regina grabbed my arm, her voice urgent.
We can't wait for him, Amalia. We have to go now.
With a heavy heart, I followed Regina into the night, the sound of shouting and gunfire echoing behind us. We ran fast until my lungs burned and my legs ached, hiding in the shrubs until the darkness had swallowed us whole. Finally, protected by the greenery, we collapsed against the side of a nearby building, gasping for breath. Regina turned to me, her eyes wide with fear and adrenaline.
We need to get out of here. They'll be looking for us.
But all I could think about was Bastian and Scully. I peered around the corner, my heart in my throat, just in time to see Bastian emerging from the library. Scully clutched tightly in his arms, but it was too late. As Bastian came out, a team of armed men in black tactical gear began running to block his path.
"Freeze!"
One of them shouted, his weapon trained on Bastian's chest. Bastian turned and ran, the sound of gunfire echoing in his wake. But as he rounded a corner toward me, I heard a sickening thud and a cry of pain. I turned to see Bastian lying on the ground, clutching his leg. A dark stain was spreading across his jeans, and his face was twisted in agony.
Amalia, run, get the letters to safety. I'll be fine.
Just as Regina and I hid in the shadows, a black van screeched to a halt beside Bastian, and armed men leaped out, their weapons trained on my friend. The men grabbed Bastian and hauled him into the van, slamming the door shut behind them. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. Bastian, my partner, my friend, was wounded and captured by the sinister forces that sought to suppress the truth about the Voynich Manuscript and the lost civilization it promised. I knew I had to rescue him, no matter the cost.